Hello everybody, thanks for watching. Welcome to a new episode of the Mobycon Academy. Today we have a very special guest. It's Anton Nikitin from the City of Vilnius. He is the Chief Engineer for the city and is responsible for the delivery of the bike network in the City of Vilnius in Lithuania. And we have invited Anton here because we've been following Vilnius's progress over the time, and we're very impressed with the quality of cycle network that's being built. And that's why we thought it would be interesting for him to come on the show to ask him how he actually gets that done. How do you get to a level of implementation that's very high? How do you get those high quality bike lanes built, et cetera, et cetera. So Anton, thanks for joining us today. Nice to see you. Always nice to see you. First of all, I think the first question for you is, how do you become the Chief Engineer for the City of Vilnius?
So it's a very new position. We have this position in the city since January last year. It was created for the whole Lithuania so that we have a person responsible for infrastructure development in the city. And I became as the first chief engineer of the city because I was working a lot. It's been I think more than 7 years, or maybe even 8 now. I started working as a cycling officer in 2016, and then I became a cycling and pedestrian officer, and then eventually somehow I became. I obviously there was a competition. I won the competition. I became the chief engineer for the city.
But are you an engineer?
No, I'm not, and that's the funny part. But the thing is, when every time I say, if anybody asks why you're not engineer, so basically my position, and I think in a lot of cities, it's even better not to be an engineer because I can come up with more creative solutions where needed, and I'm thinking that most of my job is not engineering job. I don't need to measure the asphalt or whatever. I know the needed stuff, I can learn that, but my job is strategic and management rather than, doing the very technical engineering job because I have a team working for me as well.
Yeah. And can you show us some examples of what's going on in Vilnius? I think it's one of those cities that's not on a lot of people's radar in terms of cycling development, but I think there's so much cool stuff going on. Can you show us around?
Yeah, it will be my pleasure. I think I'm going to talk a little bit about what has been happening in Vilnius since around 2005, and you'll see the change we made in the last 7 years. So the next slide, if possible, the city of Vilnius, just for the context, it's the capital of Lithuania. We are around 600,000 residents and growing rapidly every year. We are growing around 3%. We say that we have 35 mobility options. They include canoeing and hot air ballooning as well, but basically you can move around in the city in a very, very different way. And the next slide. So as the city of Vilnius, as all the cities around the world, obviously, and wherever you go, we all face the same problems. But as I like to see that we all face the different mobility choices. We have choices where we need cars, and we have choices where in the urban environments we usually don't really need a car. We can use way more different modes of transport, including cycling, which is really important, but also the public transport, the taxis, and foot as well. The next slide. And as a lot of cities, especially in Europe, we've prepared our SUMP, Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan. We did it in 2017. We started doing that in 2017, and we found out that every second trip in Vilnius was made by car, around 24% was made by foot and by public transportation, and around 1.5% in our model split was made by bikes. What we want to achieve by 2030 is like to have this way more balanced balanced approach or balanced choices of modes, so that every third trip approximately is made by car, public transportation, and by foot, and then the rest 8-9% is made by bikes. So how did we do it? And the next slide will show the progress. We went from painted lanes on the pavements to the red carpets for cyclists, and we learned some lessons, and some lessons are in the next slide. Is that sometimes it's not only the bike infrastructure, the cycling infrastructure, which you can do, but you have to do and look at everything between the facades. Let's call it like that. So in 2005, the next slide will show, the city of Vilnius thought, okay, the cycling infrastructure is so easy, let's use paint on the pavements, and it will somehow work out. But that didn't work out, and the next slide will show why. So the first one was the conflicts. Obviously, it creates more conflicts than kind of solutions for the cyclists. Usually that infrastructure is way too narrow to fit everybody. And another thing is that the bad quality of the surface is the bad thing, and the piles are not always a good quality, and if they're not very new and you just paint the lane, it doesn't work out. And then the funniest part was the paint on the pavements was so hard to get rid of. We were looking for a solution to do that, to delete the lanes, when we decided for several years, so that we don't, change the tiles, which are still quite of good quality, but don't invest too much into removing the paint. So painting over, then trying to delete it by hand, and so on and so forth. So there are men working on this picture, trying to do that very hard, but then we found quite a nice solution and removed all the lanes in, I think only in 2019 maybe, or even 2020 was the very last lanes which were removed from the pavements. So the next slide is in 2015, where the city government and the mayor set the priority, and that cycling is really one of the priorities of the city. It's not that we are painting the lanes, and these two examples, they show our first small but yet very significant changes. So on the left side is the cycling lane on the very main street of the city, which was 1.4, I guess, meters wide, and for cars there were more than 3.5 meters. So what we did, we took half meter from the cars and made the cycling lane 2 meters wide, so that two cyclists could cycle side by side. And that was a lot of discussions in 2015 or in 2016 when we did that. So the car drivers were quite angry about that, but well, there's still plenty of space for them, and there is a better quality space for cyclists. Also, we started to pilot some cycling street or cycling friendly street initiative, which wasn't in our law, and now since actually July this year, it's now a law. We have in our road code the cycling street signs, which we are putting up in our streets as well. So we accepted the challenge next, and we started small, doing some small changes, just to improve at least the quality we have, and then set the very first standards for the red asphalt, for the separated infrastructure, for not having the poles in the middle of the cycling infrastructure, which sounds funny now, but it wasn't funny in 2015 when it was normal to put the lighting pole on the edge of the cycling on the cycling path rather than putting it in other place. And we've started to build the red carpets for the city, and so you can see several examples what the infrastructure looked before and after. And it's the very same places. We built our very first really cycling street where no cars are allowed. It's a very wide, nice cycling infrastructure with even with a forgiving curb, Also, we did in a lot of spaces around the city. And while we were doing that, and every year we were putting up around 20 kilometers of cycling infrastructure, we were learning really quickly, and we've done some mistakes. The next slide will show several of them. So first mistakes we were doing was that not leaving enough space to walk for pedestrians, and that we changed really quickly in 2017 and 18 when we set the standards for pedestrian infrastructure as well. Then we saw that there is usually enough space for trees, or at least the shrubs in our streetscape when we build the cycling network, and we could do that as well. So in 2018 we said let's set the higher standards. Next slide will show. So that we need more space for pedestrians first of all, and having enough space for that, we set the really standard for visible and separated red asphalt bike lanes once again, just to have it everywhere. If we put not a red asphalt, if it's a black asphalt in some rural areas, it's for mixed use for us. Then we've developed, being inspired by the Netherlands, we've developed a special curb for separating cycling and cyclists and pedestrians, and worked on continuity and comfort and greenery as a must in our streetscape. And by working that, we started building the network. We went not just for quick wins everywhere. In a lot of places we were taking our time doing the projects and connecting the network of a very good quality. The red asphalt bike paths, which became very useful actually during COVID times, and people started to find them. So the next slide will show that we've learned also on the way the things we consider. The first is saving as many trees as possible. There was this time when we were cutting some trees so that the infrastructure is really straight and it's easy to do the technical drawings from the white page, but saving the trees, the existing greenery is the priority for us now. Then relocating the road space is also one of the things we learned to consider, not only building the cycling infrastructure, but doing more than that. Also, which is important, is playing and engaging. So tactical urbanism was a very useful tool for us. There was one street we did, I think, three different changes on the street, and now it's the final one, which is still might feel a little bit as tactical urbanism now, but it works really well as from the third attempt. So don't be afraid to do that. Also being there for and with the community. So basically going to the place where the communities are. In our case, it was cycling community on Facebook groups. I was coming there and commenting what are we doing, trying to get as many insights from them, and then it worked out pretty well. And also, building, communicating, and people start to discover the infrastructure and more. So it's around the growth of cyclists in the places where we are measuring the numbers. In 2020 comparing to 2019 was 60%. So basically, where there is good infrastructure, people start to discover it. But then again, we said, okay, last year we were let's put our standards even higher, and the thing is, the main takeaway was that we need some more holistic approach to our streets. So basically, our findings were that the roads probably are too wide. We need to rethink the entire streetscape. We need to slow the cars and make streets where there is a very slow speed, where the cars could share the space with the cyclists, and make it as a part of cycling network. And also we've developed these 12 principles for our streets, the new set of rules for our streets, where we do the checklists on every new project or every street we try to change. So these are very practical, and these basically also, none of these are talking about cyclists, because it's kind of we understand that we need to consider cycling on every street, but it's important to think about all the streetscapes, starting with the existing trees, with the new trees, then the narrow lanes and crossings for everybody, then the street lighting for pedestrians first, the decluttering, also the space for owners at the facade, so that people could plant their trees or bring their plants or I don't know, benches there, and so on. So looking at all the streets. So you can find those online, 12 principles for Vilnius streets, and there is much more about that. And the main advices from Vilnius, as I was thinking while preparing to this, so is that well, it's important to have the political will. It's obvious, but also it's really important to have the responsible manager, responsible person for developing the infrastructure. And when there is a person responsible, things can move way quicker. The quick wins are really important to show the change, to get people on board. Obviously, we have to plan, dream big, but sometimes sometimes it's important also to make some things, and that's the quick wins rather than of the best quality, but basically what we were doing, step by step, building a good quality infrastructure. Have community on board, transform streets, and have fun riding. So yeah, that's all from me, the really quick review of Vilnius. And yeah.
Yeah, great. So nice to see your journey. A fairly quick journey, right? Because we started in 2005. We're only, in planning terms, only 17 years later, and you've got quite a significant network already. What I noticed in your presentation was you mentioned standards quite often, and not just technical standards, but also setting your own standards higher and higher, right? You started with the paint on the footpath, and then decided, no, our standards need to be higher than that. And that sounds very easy. Just set the standard higher, and you will start building better things. But what helps you? What helps you in that journey? Like, what helps contribute to achieving those standards? Because I think a lot of cities have pretty nice standards, and they do want to aim high, but they get stuck in discussions about parking. And do people not have cars in Vilnius, and are they all okay with you taking away their space and making all these bike lanes, or is that a much harder process than it sounds?
Yeah, I think it's a much harder process. But the thing is with the standards. So we have our national legislation. Obviously, a lot of cities or countries, they have the national legislation, but usually that's not enough, And if you want to achieve some quality, which you are inspired, like we were inspired by the Netherlands really a lot. You can imagine. You rode the cycling infrastructure in Vilnius, so you were like, I feel like home, right? Getting the inspiration is also really important. But yeah, setting the standards higher and higher is because, when we look back at the projects we were making, in 2017. Some of them were started to being drawn in 2017, and when we started to do the construction works, for instance, in 2020, it took quite some time to do the drawing. We were looking at that, and we were not happy. So there was one project which we postponed 1 year more, so that we redo the drawing and make it better. So setting the standards is important. Learning opportunities, so that you learn from your own mistakes. You see, okay, this works in our city, this doesn't work, and then let's review it and make it a living document, not just a document to follow the rules. And in the final standard for the street design guide, there is so little technical things because we have our legislation, but there is the approach. How do you make good streets? How do you do that? And 12 principles actually have that. And we do have a lot of discussions with the communities about the parking spaces, about the intersections, about lane wide, because that's the main part. Because taking away half meter is still from 3.5 to 3 meters, it's still a big deal for cars, and the car drivers have to really learn how to ride on 3 meter wide lane. So that's a challenge for them, and we are. But then again, from the city part, we have to communicate a lot about that, and I don't think we do that enough. And even when we do a lot, I don't think we can ever do enough. But going there and talking with people and saying that, okay, let's make a choice. Okay, we can make it. In one street there was actually the example when we and it was the recent street. We took away one parking line of the parked cars and made a nice bike path, and there's not enough space for another lane for parked cars, and we went there and said, let's see, we can have it one-way street, and then we will have more parking. We can have a two-way street, and we have parking as much as it fits here. So let's do a choice. Let's just talk this through. And then the people said, the neighborhood and the people living there said, okay, maybe one-way street is a good decision, and it was a good decision for that street. And then there is way less traffic there, and there is enough parking spaces for people there. What's the next redesign of that street? We will see. You can't do that in.
Yeah. So you do engage with the community, but then you just give them the choice within the parameters you set. Like the bike lane's going in, that's out of question, but do you want one-way or two-way? And that's still a choice. Yeah. In a lot of,
I think in 80%, the law of Pareto, the 80% of our in our streets there is enough space for everybody still. In a lot of modernist cities it's like that. There is enough space for parking to keep the same amount of parking, to keep the same amount of lanes for cars, to keep the same amount of everything, and still build cycling infrastructure and still have trees planted and everything. So in Vilnius it's
squeeze it all in a little bit more. Yeah, nice. And how important is high-level political backing for that process to be successful?
I think it is important, but then again, if you don't have enough, high-level backing, and if you truly believe, and I believe that cycling can be part of our culture, so you can engage with the community and have their backing, and then they will, if they speak out and they talk about that, it's really important, and there is that discussion happening. So you can choose, if you don't have political backing, which we do, and I'm really glad we do. You can have the backing from the community, and then you will eventually have the political backing.
Yeah, you can go from the top or from the bottom. Yeah, makes sense. In terms of like where it all started, you started with the paint on the ground, right? And then Vilnius didn't have a long history of building cycling infrastructure, right? You had to start from scratch. So then there's a lot of need for technical expertise for what's now your team, to understand how to do this, how to design this, and to get those standards in. How do you organize that? How did you manage to get the whole engineering team, or at least enough to be trained up and to understand what they're building, to know what kind of choices to make? How'd you do that?
I don't know. Well, it just happens. No, the thing is that obviously, so just to be clear, since 2015 and between 2005 and 2015, around 2005, I couldn't find the exact date because it wasn't possible. But nothing happened. Something happened in 2005, the white lanes on the pavements, and then there was 10 years of doing nothing, basically. Well, there were some minor, new infrastructure, but it wasn't of a good quality. And then in 2015, the new mayor came to office, and then he was, doing that as a priority. So since 2015, we were, trying to see the best examples everywhere. We were trying to look at the standards other countries have. It's not only Netherlands, it's also, the Denmark or even Britain or whatever country we found. We were, looking at these examples and also going, and I'm really glad we had this, where we met actually in the Cycle Walk project, which was really inspirational for us, to see how it works and how we should move that. But then again, usually there are technical stuff in the legislation. How do you do that? What's the, what the quality of the asphalt needs to be, and so on and so forth. But the really details are the people who have to learn from the real examples, and then where people start to learn and they understand, and then you build some new infrastructure and you go there and you see how it works, and then you see the mistakes. So you learn from yourself, then you start learning from yourself also. So that's the thing.
Right. So international experience first, then start building your own, and then you'll figure it out along the way, basically.
Because for us, it took. I saw the curb, the forgiving curb. The forgiving curb in the Netherlands. I don't know, in 2016, first time I saw it, and I was like, okay, that looks nice. Let's try and develop it ourselves. But for our factories to start making it took like 3 years since we started. Okay, let's do it. Let's put it into all the technical drawings. It has to be there. It has to be like that. And then it took some time, and and when the first construction companies came to build the infrastructure, and said, but there is no curb, so just produce it. And then all the all the factories which were producing the concrete stuff, they started doing that.
Right. Yeah. So you create your own demand for the innovation that you create. Yeah. And I think this is the question on a lot of our viewers' minds. The red asphalt. You won't believe the number of questions we get about red asphalt. How do you get it? Why is it red? How do we get it? Is it expensive? You chose clearly red asphalt is the way to go. Is it just because you like the look of it, or is there something else behind it? And then the second question: where do you get it?
So, we chose it. It actually was in our national legislation as a recommendation to have red asphalt. So in 2015, it was already as a recommendation. So we just used it. But basically, I think it's because the red color. Pigment which goes to the asphalt, so it's a natural thing. So another second biggest city in Lithuania wanted to do the green asphalt, which was so expensive and not convenient, but they wanted to choose it as a green one, and then painting or everything, so it was way too expensive. So I'm not sure where we buy the pigment, the red pigment. I know that one company buys it from the Netherlands, actually.
Okay.
Which they then produce in our local factories of the asphalt. But we chose the red so that the color is different and it's distinguished from all the other infrastructure, and it helps us in these confusing places like intersections to see where the priority stands. So especially to the entrances to the territory, so entrances to the houses, who has the priority, you can see. So usually in our case, obviously the red asphalt never ends unless it's the intersection where cyclists do not have priority. So this helps us to have this clear situation where cyclists do have priority. And as I said, we have some black asphalt paths which are shared spaces for both pedestrians and cyclists, and it's, as I said, in more rural areas, not in the urbanized territory.
So you actively use the color of the texture and the color of the pavement to signal something more than just this is for bikes. This is for bikes, and they have priority. Not everybody understands that yet, but it takes time. Because there's still a lot of people,
liking to walk on the red asphalt. They find it attractive to walk on it, and and for the cities as Vilnius or other cities which do not have this amount of cyclists as the Netherlands have. So some people start walking there, and it's fine, but I think it's a cultural thing, and people will learn, okay, yeah, it's not my place. And actually the curb really helps. The curb is fantastic. It's 4 centimeters. 4 centimeters, it's really not that big. But this psychological thing, people feel like it's something different. It's not, the pedestrian path is elevated. So it helps tremendously, actually.
Yeah. Nice. That's good advice. Very practical advice for a lot of cities out there that still want to do same level bike and pedestrian paths next to each other, right? Then one thing, when I visited Vilnius, that was a few years ago, so that was not even your latest iterations of cycleways, but even in the photos that you see, sometimes when you squint, you're like, is this the Netherlands or is this not the Netherlands? You can't tell. And I think one of the things that really struck me is the high level of finishing and quality of construction that you get. I think a lot of countries are struggling, or cities are struggling with that, especially when it comes to cycle infrastructure, because that needs a pretty good finishing to be comfortable. And you obviously nailed that. Is that something you pay particular attention to in your tendering processes, or in how you set out the contracts or the drawings for cycle infrastructure, or do you just have really good construction companies?
We don't have anything special for that, actually, and I think it's quite good companies, but both the quality checkups. So we try to look, and it's not because of cycling, it's because of all the infrastructure. We try to look at it really closely and understand. And then there were in the first years there was a lot of discussions. Even the smallest curb sometimes. First several years we were putting the curb where the asphalt connects with the other asphalt, so which is unnecessary. Well, for instance, the entrance to the territory, it was a tradition to put a curb for the entrance, and then the asphalt was, and then sometimes it was 1 centimeter, which was bad for cyclists, so we were taking a close look at that, and then we were step by step changing that. So okay, we don't need to put the curb, the cyclist can go without any curb and just go. The asphalt can go, and it could have the curb separating other parts, and so that's that. But actually, I don't think we are there yet of a very good quality, because we still have some. I would be lying if I said it's of a best one, but trying to be better every time is the thing, and and trying to take a close look what you do and what's important, and then having people who are responsible for that, if they do cycle as well, they will understand what to look for, and what are those annoying details which have to be avoided. So we try to do that.
Yeah, and that's one of the themes that keeps coming back as well. It's not just standards, it's also self-evaluation, right? You look at what you build, evaluate it quite thoroughly, and then see what you can change.
Let me add, we also, in a lot of projects, we go back and do some changes. The project is finished, it's really new and everything is nice, and then we see, we could have done better. What can we fix now? If there is anything we can fix now. And in a lot of projects, we plan a lot of trees, or do some change, do some at least small changes so that it works way better than it was, and then trying to make it as a learning experience for the next project. Okay, let's try and see how can we improve that. So that I think that approach, to not be afraid to make mistakes, and then usually on the drawing it's fine, but then in reality it's not always like that. But we try to be better every next time.
Yeah, and I think that is a really good lesson, right, for other cities. How to do this if you're not super familiar with this building cycleways for the last 50 years, then evaluating what you've done and fixing it is always a good idea. Then the last question, if you had to give advice to other cities, the process you went through, right, from 2005 to 2015, a bit of paint, not much, and then quite a quick iteration of multiple levels of standards from okay to what's now what I would say quite ambitious, and kind of rewriting the whole way you design streets. That's a big move. Do you think those in-between steps are necessary for all cities, or do you think you can jump straight to the last step and say, if you write a new standard, just reimagine all of your entire streets and start from there? Do you need those changes in the middle, or those little steps?
I thought we could avoid all those steps, but well, from our experience, you can't. You just have to do it step by step. The one example is that in an ideal world, you could do a lot of cycling streets without separated infrastructure, and everything might work as smooth as in the Netherlands. But if there is very little amount of cyclists, you still have to build some more safe infrastructure, or at least which feels safer than no infrastructure. So, and I think in every step, there are steps. You can't go. You know where you want to go, but usually it's step by step, and you can't avoid that. And the advice, I will joke that the advice would be copy our 12 principles and our street design guide, and it's not a joke. You can do it freely actually, and we are really happy to share all the information which we collected, and also to participate together with the cities if they are starting to develop that. But I think the main takeaway is not being afraid of making mistakes. Just do as best as you can at that moment, and learn from your experience, start learning from your own experience, and see what works in your case. Maybe in other cities, the red asphalt won't be working, and that's fine as well. So yeah, you just have to find your way, and that's the thing. Just start now, and just do it, something, and then
iterate quickly.
Yeah, and then you will see really quickly what works and what doesn't.
Nice. I think that is very sound advice that a lot of cities should take to heart. We will definitely put the link to your street design guide under this video, so everybody can click there. We'll also put a link to your Twitter profile, which is quite funny, and also has some really nice photos of beautiful red asphalt cycle infrastructure. So definitely recommend that. And then, I just want to thank you very much for this conversation. It was really nice. I think there's a lot of super valuable lessons for a lot of cities out there. And I can highly recommend everybody to go to Vilnius and have a look for themselves. If you do get in touch with Anton, and he might give you a special cycle too. Maybe.
Yeah, my pleasure. Awesome. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thanks for doing
this. Everybody is welcome to Vilnius. It's a very nice city. Sometimes it rains, but usually it's a nice weather, and please go and visit.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks everybody for watching, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Mobycon Academy. Thank you.